Hello, everyone. So I'm going to begin by introducing myself. My name is Carol Abdo. I'm a psychomotor therapist from Lebanon. I hold a bachelor and a master degree from St. Joseph University in Beirut, Lebanon. And I came to Dubai 4 months ago and started working at Hope Habilitation Medical Center. So today we're gonna talk about psychomotor therapy. We're gonna talk a little bit about this field, about the motor development in children, the gross and the fine motor skills. We're gonna talk about the red flags in schools and a little bit of tips for the parent and the teachers. So I'm gonna share the PowerPoint. Okay, so red flags and motor development in school-age children. So first of all, psychomotor therapy is a healthcare profession that addresses people of all ages. It targets the motor, cognitive, behavioral, and emotional difficulties, and it helps keeping the balance between the body and the mind to reach a better mental health and a better social integration and academic performance. So we work on two things, which is the psycho and the motor. So we work on everything related to mental skills, to cognition, and to the motor skills, which is the movement and the coordination of body and space. So we study the interaction between the movement, the cognition, and the emotion, and the influence of this on the body and on the movement. So as a psychomotor therapist, we have different areas and field of intervention. So first of all, we can work in specialized institution with normal and specialized children. So we can work in the schools by doing therapy. So taking the child outside and going to a therapy room where we can work on one-on-one sessions. We can work in regular schools to prevent any motor delay and to give a kind of stimulation. We also can work in mental health clinics and hospitals with kids and with geriatrics, and in nurseries. We work as well to give a little bit of stimulation of the motor abilities to the children before going to school, and we can detect any minor delay or problem and prevent it by starting an early intervention. So we all know that early intervention is key, and the sooner we start by giving therapy or we start an intervention is better, because it can reduce the long-term effects and it can prevent potential delays in the future. Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about the psychomotor domains. So as a psychomotor therapist, there is a lot of things we work on. So first of all, we work on the interactive modalities, which are the modalities we use to communicate with each other. So for example, we work on the non-verbal communication, on the joint attention, on the pointing, on the simple instruction, and on the verbal communication, which is the oral language. We also work on the eye contact, the eye tracking, and this is like seen with small children. For example, we have a lot of children that come for a lack of eye contact, for unusual play behavior, for example, a kid who doesn't want to share his toy. So we work on all of the social behavior. We work on the gross motor skills. So the gross motor skills are the skills we use in our body to do something. So it's a coordination between the upper and the lower body. In the gross motor skills, we have the dynamic coordination. So we have the jumping skills, we have walking, we have climbing, everything related coordinated movement. We have the static balance, which is the balancing on, for example, an unstable surface, for example, standing on one leg while balancing the other. So this is static balance without moving. And we have the eye-hand coordination, which is the ability of the eye to guide the hand movement. For example, when we're doing an activity with the ball, throwing and catching, aiming at a target, basketball, football, bowling, everything related to ball skills, it's eye-hand coordination. We also work on the fine motor skills. So the fine motor skills are the skills we need to perform a small and precise movement. For example, the act of writing, the act of threading beads, the act of, for example, opening something small, puzzles, and many more. We also work on the space and time knowledge. So the space knowledge are, for example, the concept of under, on, behind, in front, and the time knowledge, which are the days of the week, the clock reading, the time of the day, the order before, after. We also work on everything related with everything related to body perception, body organization in space, knowing the body parts, perceiving the body limits, organizing the body in space. We also work on the muscle tone. So the muscle tone, it's the ability to perform something with a high tone or a low tone. The cognitive function are the function we use with academic performance. It's the attention, the planification, the memory, and, for example, the reducing of impulsivity. And finally, the handwriting skills are the skills we use while we write. So we look at the posture, we look at the pencil grasp, we look at the motor gesture of the letter, at the handwriting, the speed, and the quality of writing. So who will benefit from psychomotor therapy? So there are kids suffering from global developmental delay that can benefit from psychomotor therapy. So for example, if a child is not able to meet the milestone on his age, for example, a child doesn't walk at the age of 1 year and a half, we can consult a psychomotor therapist. Kids having ASD, for example, not being able to have a proper eye contact, eye tracking, communication, playing with toys, sharing, and everything related to the communication skills. ADD or ADHD, so we can work on the attention by reducing impulsivity and hyperactivity. Intellectual development disorder, we can also work with kids having a lower IQ than the normal and targeting different fields they need to work on. Learning disorders like dyslexia, like dyscalculia, like dyspraxia, and DCD. Genetic disorders like Down syndrome, motor disorders, and behavioral and opposition disorders. So now we're just gonna go quickly on the motor milestone for babies to know what to expect, and to know when to consult a therapist when the baby is not meeting the milestone on age. So we know that between 3 and 4 months, the baby should be able to hold his head without any help. At 6 months, he should be sitting in a proper position without any assistance. From 8 to 12 months, he can stand with one hand support, and by the age maximum to 18 months, 1 year and a half, he should walk independently. So we have a margin of 1 or 2 months, sometimes more. And for a child, if he walks at the age of 12 months or 18 months, it's still in the normal range, and it's normal, because we know that every child is unique, and some children they walk at the age that is earlier, and some of the kids they take more time, but it's normal in both cases. But if we have delayed walking after the age and 1 year and a half, it's better to consult a psychomotor therapist. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about the normal motor development in children. So at 1 year, the child should be able to walk with assistance. He should be able to pick small object with the thumb and one finger. At 2 years, he should be able to walk alone, to run for a short distance. He should be able to kick a ball and to jump. At 3 years, he will be able to do races with jump, to jump from a height, to ride a tricycle, to thread beads, big beads of course, to stack 10 blocks, and to catch a ball. He will catch a ball using both hands and with the help of his trunk. At 4 years, he will start jumping higher, and he will initiate the jumping on one foot. He will be able to throw a ball at a target, so he'll be aiming, for example, when playing bowling or when playing basketball, he will be able to aim for a target that is the basket or the bins of the bowling. So he will be able to throw a ball to someone against the wall or a target or inside a basket on the floor. Around 5 years, he should be able to balance on one foot for at least 5 seconds, to jump over 20 centimeters high, to throw a ball over a long distance, and thread small beads. And after 5 years, we will notice that it's going to be the same exercises, but with more speed and precision. So he will gain more confidence, more speed, and we can do more obstacles with longer or higher jump. He will be able to tie a shoelace, and he will start dribbling with one hand. So a little bit of tips for parents and teachers for the motor development. So we have always to encourage the child to move as much as possible, because we know that movement develops spatial perception, body awareness, and self-confidence. He will be able to manage his body regarding the limits of the space and organizing his body. So, for example, if we're going to a park or somewhere, he will be able to crawl under something. He will be able to go up, to go down, to swing. So all of the things are learned through experience. Also, we should sometimes do the exercise with our child. For example, if we're doing an activity at home, we just don't give the toy to the child and leave him alone to play with it. We should interact and try to communicate with him and help him if he needed. We should encourage parents to take the children out to playgrounds, to park, to forests, especially after the COVID, and to the swimming pool. And it's also beneficial for children to join a sports group, for example, after school, if they can do some kind of activity, basket, football, arts, craft, gymnastics, anything that the child likes. And we can also work with him at home. for the fine motor skill by doing small activity that doesn't need fancy equipment. For example, drying up the table, helping us with the cooking. For example, if we have a dough, to roll the dough, to make small pieces, to make a pizza with the color, with the ingredients we need. And this will develop hand and fine motor skills. And of course, use plenty of sensory exploration and stimulation, because this will help the child have more sensory motor experience. He will gain confidence in himself, and this will prepare him. So we can start this really by the age or 2 or even less. So we do not work until the child goes to school. Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about this disorders and the difficulties we find with children coming to the clinic or at school. So sometimes we notice the developmental delay, for example, like we said, the delayed walking or delayed motor position. The DCD, which is the developmental coordination disorder, and the dysgraphia. I'm going to talk a little bit later about these two disorders. We can also find a psychomotor inhibition, which is someone who is very reserved, very calm, who doesn't take effort to make some interactions with others. And on the opposite side, the agitation, like someone is moving a lot, can stand still, can sit for a long period on the chair. We also see a lack of body integration. For example, we see a lot of kids that don't know their body limits. So they are clumsy, they are bumping into the chair, the table. Sometimes while walking, they fall down, or they run really quickly into something, and they don't have this perception of their body in space, and they don't know how to organize their body regarding the space they are in. We find a lot of confusion between the concept of laterality, which is the concept of hand dominance, the right and the left side. So sometimes we get kids that still doesn't know in which hand they're gonna write. And here I like to say something that the concept of left and right. So on myself, so I'm able to differentiate my right hand from my left hand, is around 5 to 6 years. So sometimes we see a lot of children coming from schools, and the child is just 4 or 3 years, and the main concern is like he is using both hands while he is writing or while performing manual activity. So this is completely normal, because when the child is learning, he will use both hands. First of all, because sometimes he will get tired from one hand and he will switch to the other one. And second one, because he will try the left hand and then the right hand, and sometimes both, to try to experience and to perform with the two, and to find which side is the better one, which side is the strongest one. So for example, if I'm a person, I'm a right dominant person, I will perform my manual activity with the right hand, and the other hand, which is the left hand, will perform a support. For example, when I'm opening a bottle of water, so my right hand will open the bottle, while my left hand will hold the bottle of water. It's the same while writing. So if someone is writing with the right hand, the left hand will support the paper. So we can wait till 5 or 6 years till the child decides which hand is dominant. But if we are older, so we receive someone that is older than 6 years, we can start like worrying about it a little bit. We also work on the manual abilities that some of the kids, they have difficulties in the fine motor skills and doing daily life activities like brushing their teeth, like dressing themselves. And we also work on the visual perception, which is the ability to discriminate between two similar things, on the matching skills, on knowing the difference between two similar images, and, for example, knowing all of the details. And on the tonic regulation, if a child has hypos, it means lower body tone, or hypertonicity, a tone that is more than the norm. So we can see some red flags at school. For example, the child is not able to acquire the time concept. So the time concept of, for example, the clock reading usually starts at 7. And for example, younger than this, we can introduce the days of the week, the months we are in around 5 years old, the time of the day, all of the time concept. The lack of knowledge or of left or right concept, we said it's around 5 to 6 years till the child is able to choose which hand is the dominant one. Usually, choosing one side of the body is connected like to the brain development, and sometimes they used to in the past. For example, if someone is using the left hand for writing, they were telling him to switch to the right hand. But it's really important to let the child decide alone which side is the strongest, and don't interfere with this. And for the parents and teacher, if your child is still having difficulties in knowing which side is the strongest, I would recommend doing a lot of activities with both hands and experiencing the left and the right. And when we are giving something to the child, we should not put the object on his left side or on his right side, because this will influence his choice. For example, I will pick this with my right hand because it's closer to this hand. So we always put the object in the middle, line, and let the child choose. The spatial notions, so everything related to the spatial concept, up, big and small, up and down, or under, on. We see that many kids also have difficulty in the spatial notion, and this can interfere with writing after this, because we have to write in a limited space, so on the paper. Also, we have kids that suffer from motor coordination, the ability to jump, to do sports activities, to balance. The difficulties in the bimanual coordination, for example, when we're using the scissors, when we're threading beads, when we're performing an activity that require us to use the left and the right hand, and the fine grip. For example, to be able to hold the pen, we should have a fine motor grip. And we also see children suffering from the interactive modalities, that is the nonverbal and verbal communication. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the hand skills and the handwriting process. So we know that the hand skills are really important and are critical for early childhood learning, and it's the most important tool that students can bring to the classroom, because in every academic year, starting from lower grade, the child will have sensory experience with the Play-Doh, with the paint, doing manual activities with the fingers, craft, and everything. And then he will begin writing. So to be able to do a complex task, which is the writing, we should have a refined hand skills. And if we have difficulties in the fine motor skill, this will directly influence our writing, and in some cases, we will have a poor pencil grasp or a delayed writing. So what are the prerequisites for handwriting? So as we said, we have the fine motor skills. So the fine motor skills are really, really important for the handwriting. So for example, working on the dissociation of the fingers, for example, to be able to move each finger alone, for example, or doing this kind of activity, opposing the thumb to the other fingers is really important, because when we're holding a pen, we should put down our ring and pinky finger and only use the thumb, the index, and the middle finger. So if the child is not able to let go of these two fingers down and put these fingers up, he will not be able to have a tripod adequate grasp. So at home and with the teachers, we always work on the fine motor skills with the Play-Doh, with the sand, with everything related to sensory. And that's why we always start with everything that is the exploration. For example, writing with the sand, writing with the finger and the paint. And then we move to the perception, for example, doing a shape with the Play-Doh, with the stick. And the last step is the representation step, which is when the child has to draw the circle or write a letter or anything. Second, the eye-hand coordination. So it's the ability for our eyes to guide the movement of the hand to form the letter. So this will help the child increase or decrease his handwriting regarding the space he has. So for example, if we have two lines and the space between them is big, so the child will have to write in a big handwriting. For example, if the lines will be small, he will have to decrease his handwriting to be able to fit his writing into these two lines. Third, the concentration and the memory. So these two are required for everything related to school and to academics. So to be able to perform a task, we should have attention and concentration. The memory will help the child have more speed in the writing, because when I want to write something, and if I can memorize two words and then write them on the paper, it will save me time for writing than to write a word and then look up at the board and write another word. So the working memory, auditory or visual, is very important. And last, the spatial organization. So the paper we work on is space. Okay, so we have a space and we have to organize our writing in this piece of paper. So we use the space organization while we are writing, for example, by leaving the adequate space between two words, or for example, leaving spaces between the letter of each word. And for example, the space between each word should be bigger than the space between the letters of a word. So this is how we organize the space and how we organize our the letters to form a phrase. Okay, so the stages of the development of handwriting, we know that the fine motor skills, they develop through the years, and to be able to acquire a tripod grasp is not very easy, because the child has to go into different stages of development while he's growing up. So, for example, from 1 to 1.5 years, we usually see that the child uses all his palm to grab an object, so he will use it that way. He will not be able yet to use his finger, but he will put everything against the palm of the hand. Around 2 to 3 years, he will start moving his finger on the pen. but he will use them in an inadequate way. So he will use, for example, sometimes the index, sometimes the middle fingers, sometimes all the fingers. By the age of 3.5 to 4 years, he will have a kind of a tripod grasp, but he will have still difficulties to close the two last fingers. And it's usually around the age of 4 to 6 years that the child will have a proper pencil grasp, which is the tripod grasp with the thumb, the index, and the middle finger, while having the ring and the pinky finger closed. Okay, and usually we wait till 6 years. So also, if we have a child at school that is not able to hold the pencil properly and he's under the age of 6 years, it's totally normal. Okay, so we should always look at some of the things while writing. So we should look at the body posture. We should always be aware that the chair and the table is adequate to the height of the child. He should sit straight with his back against the chair, his feet on the floor, and with his head at a sufficient pace. So we should always remind the child not to look too closely to the paper. For example, if he's left-handed, he will write with his left hand and tilt the paper a little bit to the left. And if he's right-handed, he will write with the right hand and tilt the paper a little bit to the right. We tilt the paper a little bit to improve the mobility of the hand, because if the paper is straight and we are working, we will get to a point where we cannot open our hand anymore. So that's why the paper is a little bit tilt. And the other hand, the non-dominant hand, will support the paper while writing. So the functional handwriting grasp should be around 4 to 6 years. We should always check the pencil grip, have a good body posture, a good pencil pressure. For example, if the pressure is too low on the paper, the handwriting will be not fluid, and the trace will not be visible. If the handwriting, the child is putting too much pressure on the pen, he will have fatigue, he will have cramp, he will dislike writing, and sometimes he can the paper can be torn apart, and the head should be at a sufficient distance from the paper, not very close and not very far from the paper. So we have something in psychomotor therapy, a disorder called dysgraphia. So it's a disorder in the quality of writing, but without having a neurological deficit or an intellectual disability. So it's a learning difficulty. The writing process is slow, painful, and messy. And of course, the diagnosis is not put before the age of 7, because the writing and the pencil grasp is acquired around 6 years. So we leave the children the time to acquire the forming of the letter, and he will be able to write in a good way, and he will have acquired all of that he needs before the process of writing. So the fine motor skills, the clear graphic pattern, the fonts and shape. So children with dysgraphia, they have a very messy handwriting. They are tired very quickly because they put a lot of pressure on the pencil grip. They have a poor body position. Sometimes they have difficulties organizing their thought on a paper, and sometimes if they're writing, they cannot read afterwards, because the formation of the letter will be very difficult to read. For example, we will see that forming the letter is very, very difficult. The child is not able to form the letter properly, even after many repetition, after sensory motor activity, even with reinforcement, motivation. Also, he will write some of the word in an incorrect way. The spacing between the letter would be incorrect. For example, in one word we can have like big spaces and the word will be we can't read it anymore. Sometimes he can't write in a straight way. He will begin at the margin and then go down or go up. He will have difficulties holding and controlling the writing tool, so the pencil grasp will be inadequate. And after this, when he's writing, it will be very difficult for him to read it later. So here we see an example of a child having dysgraphia. So it's very difficult to read and it gives the impression of dirty and messy work. Some of the techniques we can use with this type of children. So sometimes when we feel that it's very hard and it's very time consuming, energy and mentally consuming, we usually switch to other type techniques with the computer, the iPad and the spell checker, so it will be easier on the child to write without having this problem to form the motor, the graphic motor of each letter. Sometimes we can give these children the permission to record the classroom discussion with an audio recorder. In exam, we can replace writing answers by multiple choice question. This will save him time and this will be more easier for him to choose the correct answer without having the stress of writing. We can try using paper of different color, thick pen, or a pen with a rubber grip. For example, sometimes we use a pencil grasp when we feel that the child needs a little bit of pushing and he's not able to hold the pen alone. But when it's something we have worked on and is still causing a lot of fatigue, a lot of difficulties at school, we can switch to other techniques. Sometimes if we can take oral tests, it will be easier for him as well, and provide extra time if there's something he has to write, because he will take more time than other to write. So here we're going to talk a little bit about the space-related difficulties. So regarding the spatial occupation, okay, we see sometimes that there are some of the kids that doesn't use the whole space on a paper. They use a side of a paper or the corner or only in the middle, and this we can see it since an early age with the children coloring and leaving a lot of white spots. For the acquisition of space concept, so the concept of under, on, below, and everything related to space. So if we have a problem in this, we will see that copying from the board will be very difficult, because when I'm copying from the board, I will see, for example, the word or the phrase, and I will put it down on the paper. So if I have a problem in my space organization, I will not know where should I write, okay? And I will also have difficulties in math regarding addition. For example, we don't know where to put the zero on the right of the number if we're writing numbers. Regarding the spatial tracking, we will have difficulties in math and geography, for example, for the location of countries. And for example, when we have to write something on the left side or on the right side.
I didn't catch that. Could you try?
Regarding spatial orientation, we will see this as well with many kids suffering from dyslexia, that they will have difficulty discriminating the letters that look alike, the B and the D, the P and the Q and U, 6 and 9, because these letters are only different in space. Some of them are on the right side, some of them on the left side. Also, visual spatial difficulties, so locating objects relatively to each other, this will impact the geometry, the geography, the reading, and the writing. And the spatial organization, so the incapacity to find a solution, for example, to a math problem. Sorry. Okay. Now we're going to talk about another disorder, something else than dysgraphia. It's the DCD, Development Coordination Disorder, and also it was the dyspraxia a long time ago. Now it's DCD. So the DCD, it's a disorder in the motor coordination, okay, everything related to motor skills, and it affects the child in the daily activity, and the diagnosis is not put also before 6 years. So what do we mean by motor coordination? For example, difficulties in tying the shoelace and engaging in sports activity, and doing balance exercises, jumping exercises, difficulties in riding a bicycle, playing with the ball, engaging of any kind of physical activity, because he will find difficulty and he will be very clumsy. So the difficulties will be seen at home, at school, and it will affect his life, not only his academic life, but his social life and his personal life. He will be slow in motor activity, and it will be very difficult for him to learn something new. For example, if he wants to learn how to ride a bicycle, he will have a lot of difficulty anticipating, and he will not get the proper order of coordination and as anticipating he needs to do in order to ride a bicycle, and even the coordination between the hands and the legs. He will, of course, dislike any sports activity, and he will have a bad performance because he will be slow and clumsy. And he will also have difficulties in the school learning, in the writing process, in the calculation, and in geometry. And I want also to say that dysgraphia, for example, can be seen along with DCD. So a child can have DCD and dysgraphia, or for example, dysgraphia and dyslexia. So these disorders can be combined as well. And it will be very difficult for him to tie a shoelace. Every motor activity that requires planification, motor planification, and buttoning, unbuttoning the buttons of a shirt, the zippers. So everything related to dressing will be also difficult. So this will impact the child on a school life. For example, in kindergarten, we also see that these kids have poverty in the drawing, and they fail to reproduce the geometric figures accepted at their ages. For example, the circle, the square, the cross, and they will have also difficulties in tracing the letter at an upper age. Now we're going to talk about the cognitive functions. So the cognitive functions are functions we use in our daily living activities, and especially at school. So we have the attention, which is divided into 3 subcategories: the selective, divided, and sustained attention. The selective attention is the ability to select one stimulus between a lot of other things. For example, the child would be able to find a letter between many phrases, or he will be able to match a shape between other shapes. The divided attention is the ability to do or to perform two instructions at a time, so it's the multitasking. And the sustained attention, it's the attention on a long period of time, so the ability to stay focused until the achievement of a task. We have the working memory, which is it can be a visual working memory or the auditory memory, which is really important for academics, for writing, for after memorizing, for example, the homework. The planification, which is the ability to anticipate and to planify the gestures we have to do in order, for example, to perform or to solve a problem, or even when we're sometimes doing an educational game, what's the best strategy to win. If we're, for example, playing at the Jenga game where we have to put some blocks, so I have to planify my gesture. For example, I will not remove one from down the tower because it will cause imbalance and the tower and it will fall down. And the impulsivity, so being able to have a little bit of patience, be able to think before proceeding. And in the cognitive function, we have a disorder that is called the ADHD or the ADD, so the attention deficit with or without hyperactivity. So nowadays we see a lot of kids suffering from this disorder, and this disorder occurs in the childhood and continue into the adulthood. So mainly we have three types. So the most common type is the combined type. We have impulsivity and hyperactivity behavior along with inattention and distractibility. We have the second type, which is the impulsive hyperactive without having inattention and distractibility. This one is the least present because often it's rare to find someone having impulsivity without having distraction or inattention. And the last type is the inattentive type and distractible, but without hyperactivity only. So some of the symptoms we see for inattention, we see that the child is easily distracted and can't stay focused on a long period of time, even with a lot of reinforcement and motivation. He is distracted, for example, if he's sitting and doing something and somebody passes near the class or a teacher comes in, he will automatically loses his focus. For impulsivity, it will be, for example, while I'm talking to someone, the child won't be able to wait until I finish. He will start interrupting others because he can't have a little bit of patience and he can't wait. So waiting for him, it's a very difficult task, even if he wants to go buy something. If there's a queue or there's a line, we will see that the kids will get very cranky and very mad. Sometimes they will start crying because they can't wait for something. So if they want something, they want it right now. For hyperactivity, so it will be children, they need to move all the time. So they cannot sit on the chair for a long period of time. They cannot stand still for a long period of time. And it's children that need to talk a lot. And sometimes it's talking not in the context of the main discussion. Okay, so also the diagnosis is not put before the age of 7 years. and the child has to undergo many assessments in speech and psychomotor and in psychology, and the diagnosis is usually put by a psychiatrist or by a clinical educational psychologist. And these symptoms have to be for a period over than 6 months and are interfering with all of his life. So they are interfering at school, at home, at work, in everything, and making him really bad in their performance. And here I just want to say that not every kid that is having inattention or impulsivity have ADHD, because there are some of the disorders or some of other symptoms that are very close to ADHD. For example, a child that is having an exam and is having anxiety related to the exam or to his performance, for example, will, for example, be more hyper, he will be more impulsive because he has a fear of the exam. So we should really look at the symptoms we should always be aware of what is happening as the parents, see the context of everything happening, and study the whole situation, and then undergo the assessment and see how are the symptoms doing with his life, and then to seek a professional. Sometimes we can do therapy, so or psychomotor or occupational or speech therapy. Sometimes the child needs a little bit of psychology therapy, and in some ways when the case is a little bit more severe or more advanced, they might need medication to help them be more focused in class and to decrease a little bit the signs of impulsivity and hyperactivity. So at school, we should avoid sitting this child next to distractions. By distractions, we mean the door, the window, and even from their desk, we should only have the tools they need to write. For example, if he only needs a paper and a pen, only give them what they need, not fancy pencils with colors, with liners, with a lot of tools. Sometimes in exam, we can provide them with a timer, so they will be able to visualize the time and how much time they have left. If we can give also extra time in exams, it would be also good. And avoid giving them multiple and complex instructions, and instead of this, giving small and simple instructions, because children having ADHD will often look at the beginning of the instruction and then avoid the other instructions. So if it's a multiple instruction, he will miss half of it or less than half. Avoid also multitasking instructions or activity where he has to remember a lot of things and do things in a proper way, and to give constant motivation and reinforcement. So that's it. If you have any question, could you please write it in the chat below, or any comment I can help with. No questions? So if you have any question or you want to ask about more information, you can email me on the Hope website email or directly send a question in the chat. Okay, so thank you so much for listening, and I hope it was clear and you benefit from this presentation. Thank you so much.